nuns taught us there are two ways through life. The way of nature and the way of grace. You have to choose which one you'll follow.
Welcome, everyone, back to another edition of Let's Take 5, the podcast where we discuss one of the greats of cinema and their excellence and range. My name is Eric Martindale.
My name's Austin Luger.
And today we're continuing our Terence Malick 5. The previous films that we covered on this were...
Badlands.
Days of Heaven.
The Thin Red Line.
And now today we're doing The New World, and then we'll wrap up with Tree of Life next week. But today, so we're talking about The New World, which is takes place in 17th century America. I think The New World is pretty self-explanatory. So the English have come over. They're making this settlement. They meet Pocahontas. It's the story of John Smith and Pocahontas, and then eventually John Rolfe, and... basically, it's that entire story of, that town, Jamestown, right?
Yeah.
And so it's Virginia in that time period, and it's a retelling and a reimagining that story with the Terence Malick typical nuanced voiceover and amazing set design and some pretty good performances. And then from there, we move to, at the end of the film, England, which is, of course, where Pocahontas lived the rest of her days with her husband, John Rolfe, and eventually passed away at the ripe old age of, 20 or something like that. I'm not sure how old Pocahontas was, but it wasn't very old. And, that's basically the movie in a nutshell, which is interesting because we were discussing before this came on. So there's three different cuts of this film. There's a cut that most people saw, which would be the theatrical edition, which is 135 minutes. There's also a 150-minute cut, which was the original cut of the film before the theatrical cut, so it actually predates the theatrical cut. And then there's now the restored 172-minute cut, which is the one that we're actually reviewing, you and I. So we may talk about some things that happened in this film that did not happen in the other versions of the film that you might have saw. I doubt many people have seen the 150-minute version one, but no. So, but anyway, what'd you think, Austin?
I really liked it, because I saw the theatrical cut. I got it from a DVD from Blockbuster when it came out, so that was about 10 years ago plus. And I really liked it, because I remember at that time I had seen Thin Red Line and thought it was okay, I thought this was better, but I didn't really get what was kind of the critical shrug about it, because it was still really pretty.
Well, it had a lot of praise. Not praise, a lot of... it was getting a lot of buzz prior to it coming out, and once it came out, it just completely deflated and dropped.
Well, it was a thing where the producers kind of recut it without him, and it was kind of the allure of Terence Malick's fourth film.
Yeah, sure.
It's like his fourth decade now, and it's had one average out for a decade. Watching the 3-hour cut, I was just absolutely blown away by it, because it, much like some of his previous films, he really does feel like a painter who kind of redoes themes into kind of different environments, where it doesn't feel like he's repeating himself necessarily. Well,
not repeating himself in story, but definitely repeating himself in technique.
Yes.
Often.
But there's still a bit of an evolution with this one, and it does feel like the middle movie between Thin Red Line and Tree of Life. And it was funny because I watched these out of order, and the Thin Red Line begins with Jim Caviezel, interacting with people of the land and just kind of really becoming more comfortable there than he is on the battlefield. And it was fun to see that maybe 10-minute portion of Thin Red Line become so important here. Because that's really how John Smith sees the world and how he becomes so impressed by what he's seeing. He literally starts the film in a cage where he's kind of being imprisoned as he kind of comes to the New World, and he only sees it through the squares of his cage. And he's the one more than anyone else who really embraces their culture and the beauty of undiscovered land from their point of view.
And also because he wants to sleep with Pocahontas.
Oh, yeah.
So that's definitely a big part of his motivation.
Yeah,
too.
He is
infatuated.
It is a romantic point of view, bizarrely a romantic point of view of two acts, of two different men, who neither of which are perfect, but neither of which are villains, I think, in a very curious thing. I alluded in a previous episode that I think this is the only film where there are villains in a Malick film because the British are dicks in this movie.
Yeah, they are, and so is the chief. Chief Pocahontas is dead. He comes off that way as well. I mean, at the same time, though, you're kind of like, you see his point of view more because he's not coming over to someone else's land. So.
Right. I sympathized with him quite a bit. It was just like Christopher Plummer and like Eddie Marsden, just like, and David Thewlis. Just so like, they are so hostile from the very beginning. Like as you're walking into a land that Malick is depicting as a kind of paradise-like place, they're immediately setting law and order in a way to bring other people down.
Yeah, and they have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
That being another thing is like, this movie does a great job accenting the point that they have the weapons and the technology and the ships and all that other stuff, but they can't in the order, and I'm using quotations with that, and the propriety that befits a gentleman, but they don't have a clue how to survive here. Absolutely no clue. And without the guidance of the Native Americans, and specifically and quite literally at one point Pocahontas, they would all die. They would all freeze to death, and they would all starve to death. And because she helps them, and because she is in love with one of them, and because they won't leave, because the agreement with the chief was eventually that they would go back, once they'd stay for the winter, but then go back, and once it becomes obvious that's not what they're going to do, war breaks out between the two groups of people. Pocahontas is then shunned from the group, and she starts living amongst them as kind of a celebrity. Because, what I was thinking was going to happen at first was that the movie surprised me a bit because I thought she would be seen as like, oh, this savage is living amongst us now. We'd have to spend now 25 minutes where people just treat her poorly. That's actually not what happened. She kind of becomes sort of the rock star. And from that point on, pretty much throughout the rest of the movie, she's a huge rock star in England, too.
Oh, huge,
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like, so that was kind of cool because I just wasn't expecting that, and part of that is me probably not knowing that history very well. But at least not as well as I should. But I was a little uncomfortable during this film a couple times.
Because she's so young?
Because she's so young.
Yeah.
The actress playing the part is 14. Now, she looks 14 going on 22. Like, I get that. But, like, she's acting opposite romantic leads of two men that are significantly older than her. And because I knew how young the actress was, because I Googled it while I was watching the film, I Googled her, and then I saw that she was 14 when she was making this film. Kind of creeped me out a little bit.
Sure.
Not gonna lie. It's a general creep fest because it is. And that's not to take away. I really don't want to take away from her performance because I think that gives probably the best performance in the entire movie.
Oh, I think she's incredible.
But so much of the movie is about her sexuality.
Sure.
And and it's not done in a way where, like, Lolita, where it's almost like that's the point, and it's not and it's not just like a little flirtatious, like, say, Haley Steinfeld in True Grit to the Matt Damon character. This is distinctly a romantic movie about a 14-year-old, and we're buying in.
I don't think it's a sensual film, though.
Well, I'm sorry?
Oh, it's not a sensual film.
It's well, maybe not,
because I think like
it's more about love.
It's
like,
love,
right?
It's love and those complexities. I think because it did happen, which is the grossest of it all.
Yeah.
But there's something particular about the motivations and perspective of John Smith and John Rolfe to me, because John Smith is clearly someone who wants to like live amongst them. He is so enamored with kind of how they live and the beauty of it all. As seen, I think, one of my favorite sequences when he just, like, it's kind of like how he learns to communicate with them, when he's, like, first with everybody.
Yeah, that seems great.
In a great, like, Malick way. It's not, like, breaking down, like, verb tenses. It's kind of finding common language through visuals and appreciation of nature. John Rolfe, who, played by Christian Bale, is not really... He still has, I think, pure romantic interest in Pocahontas, but the difference is that, in his mind... he is going to give her a better life, and she will change to what he thinks will be a greater situation.
Well, and she is in a situation where she doesn't have a choice because she can't go back to her people. But the other thing, like, it has to be considered there too, is that both versions of these men met Pocahontas at very different points in her life. Like when John Smith meets Pocahontas, she's still, an American Indian, and then whenever
John
Rolfe meets her, she's part of the British, peasantry.
Yeah.
So it's like a completely different. Yeah, different, almost like a different Pocahontas that they're meeting, and part of that became kind of a struggle for me in the film too, just because I just found the John Smith character and her relationship a lot more alluring for me personally. Like I liked that part of the story more than the John Rolfe character, was much more. He's a good guy, but he's like much more stiff and just.
He's more stiff, but also in a great Malick fashion. He is very, questioning everything through this kind of voiceover, and, he feels in his heart he's doing the right thing, but he kind of keeps seeing Pocahontas not be, overjoyed with what he's doing. He's not, mad at her. He's confused, and that confusion is why their romantic duo is not as powerful.
So but you felt that, too.
Oh, absolutely. Right? And that's why, she, still thinks about John Smith and with John Rolfe.
So it is deliberate. Yeah, but it just I don't know. The movie slowed quite a bit for me, and not that that's not okay for I can live with boring. Boring to me is sometimes effective if used appropriately. I think 2001's best movie ever. I think it can be boring, and I think that works. It uses that as a tool. And this film, it was boring without me really, I think, ever getting a full handle on why I was being told the story to begin with. What was I supposed to, glean from it? Because those points that you were talking about earlier at Thin Red Line were made in about 10 minutes. This is an 175. So, and it never really shifted gears. It seemed to only ever be about those type of themes, outsider to insider, with John Smith to the people, the Native Americans, and then eventually Pocahontas to the English, and that sort of role reversal, and then the love story on top of that. So I don't know.
Well, if we're going to go with another kind of connecting movie, one of the themes that I think really worked for me in this film, that is kind of his bridge between his first three and then Tree of Life, which we're going to do next week, is Malick's interest in indoor-outdoor. If he had to pick one, he prefers outdoor.
He does.
Very much so. Big fan. And that is the first 2/3 of the movie, right? It's they're in the new world, seeing what all this is, and still, even though you're building the town, the town pretty much still outdoors. Yeah. Because they don't have a lot of walls yet. But the way he depicts the indoor and these palaces and these paved roads and these kind of courtyards is so... It's not obviously negative. It's just you always feel where the walls are. You know where those ceilings are. And I found that to be just so interesting to kind of place her and us into that situation. And you're not... It could have gone for easy things. It's not claustrophobic. It's just different, and it's not welcoming in the same way.
Yeah, they show up and they immediately build walls. Yeah. It's the first thing they do to keep people out. And that's kind of funny because it's that's not how the natives live.
Also, it's the new world. It should be open to everybody, right? John Smith is literally in a cage under the ship's floor as he enters land owned by nobody, right?
Yeah. But it's just what they know. Right. That's how you build cities in Europe. Yeah. You put walls up,
And they're immediately kind of going back to European class deciding.
And that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm not talking about Europe now. I'm talking about Europe in the 17th century. It's to keep out, bandits, you need a bulwark.
But that's kind of why we also romanticize the colonial America, right? Is when Americans decided to start from scratch. Yeah. And kind of look at Greek philosophers and different way of government to make something new. Which is try to be very necessary because the British guys are just so miserable.
Yeah.
Like they're not happy.
Right. Every basically shot of them as them suffering for the most part. Which is done really good by the whole production design and
oh my
shot.
God,
like all
right?
that stuff is like great. I mean, it's literally a work of art. I know I can't remember his name. It's somewhere it's on the DVD. I know the same guy did Tree of Life with him. I don't know if he did the other films as well, but
I would imagine, not just from guessing, I don't have the papers open right now, but just the way this film, more than the last three, really kind of views the camera as a handheld idea to kind of swoop in and out of like getting really close to people's faces, and it's a great idea. You built this great set and now play in any angle you want in it, and it's so gorgeous. Like I was in love with the look of this whole movie, and I think Colin Farrell's great in it as John Smith. We haven't mentioned him yet. And, of course, the young woman who plays Pocahontas.
She's unbelievable.
She's so good.
Yeah.
It is like the perfect kind of Malick actress and character of gorgeous voiceover and just a complete welcoming to the world around her.
Well, let's talk about the voiceover for a second. So, I mean, to talk about Malick, and maybe this is something better for the wrap-up, too, but, like, every film we cover is going to have voiceover. But the voiceovers have all been moving towards a direction, and then and even more so in Tree of Life, like from what we originally had in Badlands, which was very, very clear, like linear voiceover, even though what she's talking about is not always on point because she's writing from the perspective of a young kid who's out on the lam with a murderer.
Who's in the moment of it.
Like yeah, exactly. But the points she's making aren't actually pertinent maybe to the story, but they're still very distinct and they inform the narrative.
Yeah.
And then when you move from that to Days of Heaven, it's less on the point. And then the Thin Red Line, it starts to jump around people, and now we're just kind of talking about concepts and abstract thinking and philosophy to this, which is now even less than that somehow. It's sometimes the voiceover, I can't tell if they said it or, and it's intentional. I don't know if it was a voiceover or he actually said the word, because whatever, I know I just heard a word. Like, and it may have been so soft that I wasn't, but now he's talking, so did he just say it or was it the voiceover? So it even gets in more so, and then in Tree of Life, I think it's like,
well, we'll talk about that next week.
Right, well, it's some kind of combination of all of them where it may be more pertinent, but it also is less audible.
Yeah.
So,
it's funny with this one in particular, more than any of them, because this has more of a romantic feel than any of the films. These observations that they're having are moments where they are observing nature, life, love, everything. Perhaps not even of this moment, but just in general. That is where you'd find like common ground, and to me, that's like one of the ways they depicted accurately, like the attraction. You know what I mean? Like John Smith has these thoughts, Pocahontas has these thoughts. There's an overlap in how they see the world, and that actually added to their chemistry, which is such an odd thing. Since that is an effect done not on camera at the moment. It would be added in later.
Well, it's also too like that. That's the old. It's a. I mean, I know it's based in real fact too, but it is the old Romeo and Juliet story. Like the problem isn't them; it's the world around them.
Sure,
right? You know, and it's going to be doomed from the start too because of the world around them, and not because of you know who they are and whatnot. But as far as the voiceover is concerned, you're right about like what it's informing. But it's just of the 5 films, without going too much into Tree of Life, I think this is the one you actually don't need it as much. And the reason for that is because because the movie is so visually striking in that every picture in the film is so etches into your mind that a lot of times I found myself not really even paying attention to what they were saying. I was just watching the images, and usually they were just commenting on the images.
Yeah.
You know, or they were commenting on like, oh, I love this person. Well, obviously, like I'm watching that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, I'm not. If it's Sean Penn talking about how, and this isn't a line, but if he's talking about how he's afraid he's right about to die in Thin Red Line, then that's telling me what he's feeling. You know, something that is actable, but also, you know, do a lot with that. If I'm watching two people fall in love and you're commenting on how you love somebody, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I'm watching it. You know what I mean? So, like, it was just so striking images that there was a weird, like, part of me that thought, like, and I would never recommend this, I'm just saying, like, you could watch the film without dialogue.
Oh, I just wanted it as a background. My film my house at all times. I don't have silence.
I mean, and you could follow the story.
Yeah.
You know, you could. Because, again, all the images are really striking, and you would still feel something. You know what I mean?
And the performance also just dictates so much, too. I just keep thinking about the British men, I mean, played by some great actors, Paul Marthulis and whatnot. And whenever, like, Colin Farrell returns back to that camp, he is so stiff and he's so, like, concerned. Because it's like everyone there is, like, judging at any moment. And while there is some judgment, like, from the chief we mentioned, too, it's not the same kind of thing.
Well, he has more of a argument.
Yes. Yeah. And the camera just, like, really still, like, swoops in and out in a way that, like, actually feels more upsetting. It feels more dangerous. And also kind of what adds to that is how shitty their houses look out of that, too. Like, when we think about the mythicism of colonial America, we don't think about how muddy the ground is. Yeah. And that's what kept striking me of, like, oh, there are no roads. Yeah. There are no roads. This is all gross and disgusting.
On and it's all yeah.
Whereas you don't see that kind of mud with Pocahontas and our people. No. You know, like, that is, they're accustomed to the world in a way that these strangers aren't. And yet the stranger aspect is also what's intriguing her and intriguing John Smith. Of, like, it's discovering something new.
Yeah, you know, it plays a lot with, like, you know, it's interesting, like in a movie, I think it happened in Fitzcarraldo, and I know it happened in Aguirre, but it's like, how often are natives kind of just depicted, like, 100 yards away in the woods somewhere, and then they hop behind a tree?
Yeah.
Like, Native Americans, I feel like, are usually, well, in that case...
those are Southern Americans.
So, yeah, yes. Native Southern Americans. You don't see them until they want you to see them. And I really like how that played with the flirtatiousness between John Smith and her. Like, she's always, like, at a distance and unattainable. Like, and it just sort of worked in a weird way.
Because they all have home field advantage.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And they're out and they're free because this is their land, but we don't dare venture too far away from our walls. We need these walls, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of, and it allures them into a false sense of security because they're all going to die there. Anyway.
Sure. Well, and then you counteract that with the riches of, you know, back in Europe, right? Like, what does all this mean? How rich this palace is and how rich these clothes are? Like, is that denying, like, oh, we're never going to die? It's going away from facing our own mortality, I guess, in a way. I don't know. It's something that it feels so empty, even though that's when most things are in the frame during those sequences.
Yeah, no, you're true. You're true.
I'm true.
Yes. You're very true to me. So, like, yeah, just to emphasize one last time, I do think that she was incredible in the film.
Oh, absolutely.
The fact that she was 14 was mildly upsetting to me.
Sure.
Just a little bit. I think the film gets exploitative? Not really, but she is... she's naked in the film. Or it's a body double or whatever.
In the first scene, right? It's in the water. Yeah.
And then, I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. You know, but I just thought when the romance was with people that are significantly older than her, not because the characters are, but because I know Colin Farrell is probably 25 years older than her whenever this was shot.
I think I always assume he is always 32.
Yeah.
I see Colin Farrell any film, any decade. He's 32.
Well, let's say he was just 32.
It's still...
He still would
almost
have been
20
18 years older than she was. So, I don't know. It seemed a little weird to me once I had trouble getting that out of my head and separating that from the rest of it because she's just a kid. But then, I looked it up and I think I saw something. Pocahontas was like 18 or 19 years old, so I don't know. But anyway, I don't know. That hurt the movie for me because it's a personal thing. It was just like... I can't shake that she's just a little girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't shake that. and it's not the fact that she doesn't look like a little girl. Like I can, she's cute, but like she's a kid, and it was a little weird. But it was a good movie. It was a good movie.
I really like it. I was like just blown away by this cut, and I think it's.
I want to see
one of his most beautiful. Now. Yeah, it's
sorry.
As my memory of 10 years ago, and liking it. I think there's, if I remember correctly, way fewer British stuff by the end. I think that's cut down pretty dramatically.
There's not that much in there.
I think they cut a ton of voiceover.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
And I can't really remember much besides that.
There's the period in the film before right when John Smith exits and when John Rolfe appears. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot cut from that segment. Because it did feel like a little dead air there for me. But that's just one man's opinion.
Well, and we have to, of course, mention the Disney film Pocahontas, because you know who's in that film? Christian Bale.
Is he?
Yeah, he plays one.
Please tell me he plays John Rolfe.
I think John Rolfe isn't exactly in that film.
It's just John Smith?
Just John Smith as Mel Gibson. But he is like a younger person in it who could maybe grow up to be John Rolfe. I don't know.
Yeah, Christian Bale was a child actor.
Yeah, just good job being in both Pocahontas films.
What about him screams Pocahontas?
Nothing.
Yeah, it was good.
It's a good movie. All right. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to catch more episodes of Let's Take 5, you can go over to theartmore.com. You can leave a comment on any episode, including this one. Let us know what you think of The New World, Malick in general. And while you're there, check out some other cool podcasts like The Immortals, where myself and 3 others review the 1001 movies, albums, food, songs, and TV shows you must consume before you die. And, also Ad Absurdum is back, where a duo of lawyers tackle issues in pop culture. They just did an episode about Escape from New York, where they talked about martial law. Where else can we find you?
Constant Version is my YouTube channel.
This week of episode 100, we'll be discussing Terence Malick's declared masterpiece with a special guest. Until then, I'm Austin Ligger.
I'm Eric Martindale.
Come, Spirit. Help us sing the story of our land. You are our mother. We, your field of corn. We rise from out of the soul of you.